Coming up.
Invite the CEO of CBC Radio Canada, Tate, and the Minister of Heritage to appear for a period of 2 hours.
The idea that we are starting to think about the question of whether or not we want political interference into the world of the CBC and having the minister, any minister, come to speak to what is happening at CBC, I think is hugely problematic.
The head of CBC might tell the committee that in November and December, added to the 14.9 bonuses that she has already paid out in 2023, April 9th might be a good day for us, where she's going to tell us that, oh, well, you know what, November and December, I was Santa Claus and we gave out more bonuses. So April 9th might be the nice date.
Thank you.
We've heard in the context of this amendment, Mr. Waugh make light of collective agreements and payments made under collective agreements. We've also heard him mock CBC employees who have lost their jobs and the competence of House of Commons.
Point of order.
Today. So
that we be clear that the Jets nowhere in their announcement talked about the carbon tax, right? So, I mean, just to bring that into this committee is just bizarre. I mean, if we want to talk about hockey, let's talk about hockey, but let's be truthful. When the Winnipeg Jets talked about a drop in sales, they didn't talk about the carbon tax.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
That pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee invite the CEO of CBC Radio-Canada, Tate, to appear for a period of 2 hours to answer questions concerning 1. The increase in funding to the public broadcaster of nearly $100 million per year. 2. The exemption granted by the government to CBC Radio-Canada to reduce its operating costs by 3.3%. 3. The payment of performance bonuses totaling nearly $15 million to CBC Radio-Canada executives, and that she explained the impact of these announcements on the announced elimination of 800 positions, as well as the continuation of high-quality journalism in the regions of Quebec and Canada. Thank you.
Anyone speaking to the motion or against the motion?
I would offer the following. The motion would read that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee invite the CEO of CBC Radio Canada, Tate, and the Minister of Heritage to appear for a period of 2 hours, each within 7 days of the adoption of this motion.
That I don't think there is such a thing as a friendly motion unless you discussed it with the person before the meeting and they had agreed to entertain it. So you are putting forward an amendment to the motion. Can you just read the piece that's the amendment, Ms. Thomas?
I'm just trying to be kind.
I know you are.
Offering an amendment.
But we have to vote on it. Please entertain the amendment. You are adding the Minister of Canadian Heritage. And you're adding a timeline, is that it?
That is correct. So I am adding the Minister of Heritage, that she would also come. So it would be Tate who would come for 2 hours, and the Minister of Heritage would also come for 2 hours, and that each of these witnesses would appear within 7 days of the adoption of this motion. Sure. So the amendment adds that the Minister of Heritage would come. The reason I feel this is important is because there's evidence to suggest that the Minister of Heritage actually knew that these bonuses had been given out, which the problem is not the fact that the bonuses had been given out in October. The problem is that the CEO of the CBC, Tate, came to this committee and seemingly misled us to believe that that wasn't the case, that bonuses actually were being withheld until a further decision could be made in March. The Minister of Heritage ultimately is responsible for holding the CBC accountable, and so it seems appropriate that she would come to this committee and help us understand what happened here. So that is the reason for that. And then the second amendment that I have added here, the second part of the amendment that I have added here is that they would come within 7 days of the adoption of this motion. The reason why that is important is because sometimes these types of motions can get punted down the line and don't end up actually becoming a case for study here at this committee for quite some time. And I do believe that, as my honourable colleague, Mr. Champoux, has outlined, this is of the essence. There are important things that need to be discussed. There is accountability that needs to be had. Questions need to be posed and answers need to be given. And so that would be the reason for the timeline there. If I may, my colleague, Mr. Shampoo, didn't really speak to the essence of this motion. Perhaps he intends to do that in just a moment. I'll speak to it from my side of things, however. The overall motion calls for the CEO, Catherine Tate, to come to committee. And now I've added the Minister of Heritage, and to answer with regard to bonuses that have come to light. Members of this committee will recall that just before Christmas, the president and CEO of CBC Radio Canada, Ms. Catherine Tate, announced that she would be cutting 800 positions. And she said she was doing this because of what she called chronic underfunding. It's important to remember that the CBC is given $1.3 billion annually, and that the Heritage Minister has actually increased that by another $100 million this spring. Now, when asked whether or not millions in bonuses for top executives would be out of the picture based on this hardship, she said it's too early to say. In other words, she was reserving the right to give bonuses to top executives, but she was scrapping 800 jobs. So at the end of January, we asked Ms. Tate to come to this committee where we had the opportunity to ask her questions with regards to the absurdity of this decision. During that time, she led us to believe that bonuses for 2023 had not yet been given and would be withheld until March. However, based on an ATIP and access to information, we now find out that actually she had given $15 million in bonuses even before she made the decision to scrap these 800 jobs, which means she put those bonuses ahead of those jobs. She put bonuses for executives ahead of 800 individuals who needed those positions. And so, given the fact that it seems she misled this committee, we have every right to bring her back and to ask her important questions.
The idea that we are starting to think about the question of whether or not we want political interference into the world of the CBC and having the minister, any minister, come to speak to what is happening at CBC, I think is hugely problematic. I think we have seen time and again the politicization of the CBC, the idea that, we hear from our conservative friends day and night that they want to defund the CBC, that the CBC is somehow, the government mouthpiece. I think when we start bringing ministers to the table to start asking questions about what the CBC is doing, I think we are going down a very, very slippery slope.
Thank you, Mr. Noor Mohammed. Ms. Ashton, and then Mr. Waugh.
Yes. In the spirit of expediency, I think what's most important here is to hear directly from the CEO of the CBC, Ms. Tate. I think we can ask questions to the minister when she comes on the estimates, but I would like to see a meeting focused on the CEO. So we won't be supporting the first part of the amendment, and like Monsieur Shampoo, we are open to the second part in terms of timing. Yes.
The statements that Ms. Tate made in December, knowing that the bonuses had already been, performance bonuses had already been handed out in October. It's frustrating because if you listen to the meeting from December, Ms. Tate claims there were no performances at all. The bonuses were handed out in 2023. They normally do that in the early part of 2024. So right away we have found, Madam Chair, that Ms. Tate actually lied to the committee here when she came in December, which is really, as we all sit around as politicians, and she is head of a major corporation that is $1.4 billion and actually came to committee and misinformed everybody around the table as a real concern. I'd like the motion by Ms. Thomas for a couple of reasons. We need to reconvene next Tuesday, March 26th, 7 days from now, to hear from Catherine Tate. She has misled Canadians. She came in here saying, I need to drop 10% of the CBC staff, over 800. And then the Treasury Board, along with the Heritage Minister, agreed to a $96.1 million gift to the CBC, which brought them from $1.3 billion to $1.4 billion in the budget. So it's interesting, Ms. Tate has not talked about any more cuts, despite getting $96 million. She hasn't even really talked about, are we going to reinstate those that we had on the chopping block? So it's an interesting dilemma that we have in Heritage here, because I definitely think we need to hear, Madam Chair, from the head of the CBC, Catherine Tate. And I also think, because the Liberals at one time talked about a 3.3% decrease to the funding of CBC, and then all of a sudden turned around and gifted the CBC $96.1 million. And that's why I like the updated amendment by Ms. Thomas, because where did this money come from? When CBC went crying that we're going to cut 800 staff and that our bonuses, well, they're not coming, then we find out the first 10 months were paid out. So we still don't know November and December Christmas performance bonuses, which I think we're going to find out very shortly, either at the end of March or certainly the April. But it's astounding to me how you can reduce 800 employees at CBC and still give out nearly $15 million in performance bonuses.
The Minister of Heritage's role in the managerial decision or financial decisions being taken. Clearly the spirit, the original motion, the spirit of the motion is the expenses, the spending of sums of money, which has nothing to do really within the mandate or the role of the Minister of Heritage. And so therefore, I don't believe, I will be voting in favor of this in terms of including the Minister of Heritage. And with regards to the delay that my colleague has included in the motion, I agree with Mr. Champoux. We can certainly come back from constituency week and deal with this motion unless there seems to be an urgency that it needs to absolutely be dealt with within the next 2 weeks.
I'm going to see no other hands up. I'm going to entertain a vote on the amendment. So, clerk, please.
Was there a sub-amendment?
The amendment by Miss Thomas is what we're dealing with.
Okay.
The ones in red.
Mr. Champoux was not a sub-amendment?
No, he hasn't made it. We can.
Okay.
No, he
Just
wasn't
clarify.
making a
Perfect.
sub-amendment at the moment. He was just putting forward an idea.
So the vote is on the amendment of Ms. Thomas. Mr. Noor Mohammed.
No.
Ms. Dillon.
No.
Ms. Gainey.
No.
Ms. Latenzio.
No.
Mr. Fillmore.
No.
Mr. Waugh.
Yes.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Gourde.
Oui.
Mr. Lawrence.
Oui.
Mr. Champoux.
Non.
Ms. Ashton.
No.
Yeas pour 4-4, nays contre 7-7.
Well, the amendment is defeated, and
If we could put perhaps I'm just going to do this on the fly, and perhaps we can get the assistance with the clerk to iron this out, but that we have the meeting with Ms. Tate for no less than 2 hours on April the 11th, the first date of our return.
It's April 9th.
April 9th, je m'excuse.
no less than 2 hours on April the 9th.
It's very reasonable. I don't even think we need to debate it. I think we all agree, and I think we can move directly to the vote. Madam Chair, I support this amendment.
Philip, to this amendment by Mr.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted us to clarify that this is it is an invitation. Monsieur Champoux, I just want to make sure that we have clarity around this being an invitation or a summons to the CBC CEO. It's an invitation, correct?
It's invite.
Invitation. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
All right, thank you. And so anyone speaking, Anna?
I just have a question. If she's not available that date, like say she's got vacation already planned or something, is it better not to leave it open to as soon as possible? Or I don't know. It just seems like if she can't do that date, then where are we? We resume this whole conversation, or?
I think it's more than reasonable, given we're giving the CEO 2 weeks, 3 weeks of notice for her to be there. But I would also be amenable to changing it to any time before April 9th or before, if you want to give the clerk additional time. And the Conservatives are more than happy to meet during the break week, or if that better suits the CEO schedule. And if there is an issue, maybe the clerk could inform us as to what would happen if Miss Tate said she was unavailable there.
I mean, if she said she's unavailable, we cannot take her and bring her in a stretcher or something. I mean, I don't know, but whatever. Go ahead, Georgia.
So if she is unavailable, I would inform the committee and they can decide whether they would like to be open to a different date or to go the route of the summons.
Let us know if she says she's unavailable and we can make that decision, okay? All right, so now I go to Mr. Watt.
In fact, Madam Chair, we might even get a bonus here when she comes April 9th, as the head of CBC might tell the committee that in November and December, added to the 14.9 bonuses that she has already paid out in 2023, April 9th might be a good day for us, where she's going to tell us that, oh, well, you know what, November and December, I was Santa Claus and we gave out more bonuses. So April 9th might be the nice date.
Thank you.
We've heard in the context of this amendment, Mr. Waugh, whom I have a tremendous amount of respect for, make light of collective agreements and sort of payments made under collective agreements. We've also heard him mock CBC employees who have lost their jobs and the competence of House of Commons
Point of order.
today. So I'm not sure if that's,
Point of order.
that's the tone we'd like
Mr.
to
Nur
set.
Mohammed, that is not speaking to the amendment.
Thank you.
It's
No,
out
but it
your
is, Madam Chair, if I could be allowed to
intervention is
finish
not
my
with
point.
regard to the amendment, but you are, in fact, not speaking to the amendment.
If we're going to do this, we have to be able to give people enough time to show up. We have to do the work, and the clerk is doing her work to make sure people can show up. But this is an important
Summons,
consideration.
Actually, Bell was not a summons. It was an invite.
It was
not
an
a
invite.
summons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to call the question on this.
The vote is on the amendment of Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Nur Mohammed.
trying to unmute myself. I am going to vote no on the amendment, Madam Chair.
Ms. Dillon.
No.
Ms. Gainey.
No.
Ms. Latanzio.
No.
Mr. Fillmore.
No.
Mr. Waugh.
Yes.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Monsieur Gourde.
Oui.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Monsieur Champoux.
Oui.
Ms. Ashton. Oh, sorry, your microphone is lifted, so I could not hear that.
Can you use your thumb if your microphone isn't working? You are in agreement, okay? She's a yes vote.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 5.
The amendment passed, so that the motion now under consideration is an amended motion that has the words Ms. Tate for no less, after Ms. Tate added for no less than 2 hours on April the 9th. Seeing no hands up, let us vote on the motion as amended. Clerk?
Mr. Nur Mohammed.
I'm going to vote no.
Ms. Dillon.
No.
Ms. Gainey.
No.
Ms. Latanzio.
No.
Mr. Fillmore.
No.
Mr. Waugh.
Yes.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Monsieur Gourde.
Oui.
Mr. Lawrence.
Oui.
Monsieur Champoux.
Oui.
Ms. Ashton. We can't hear you again. Thumb, please, Ms. Ashton.
I'm muting.
This is
Oh, you're
down.
muted?
Right.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Sorry. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 5.
The motion is, as amended, is passed. Thank you very much. Ms. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to move a motion for consideration for the committee today. The motion reads as follows. Given that the Liberal government's carbon tax has had a detrimental impact on the cultural, civic, and economic life of Canadians, making life increasingly unaffordable and severely limiting their ability to support and enjoy the arts and culture sector, the committee report to the House its recommendation that the government should immediately cancel the carbon tax. And then I would like to resume.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. New.
I would like to, if you...
Sorry,
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
New Mohammed. Please use your hand, then I can notice you.
I did.
Okay.
I did, but nobody called on me, so you waved frantically.
All right.
Madam Chair, I would like you to rule on the admissibility of this motion to this specific committee, please, Madam Chair, because I'm fairly certain we don't deal with carbon pricing in this committee.
Then I would ask that we suspend for a few moments while I look at the admissibility or inadmissibility of this motion.
It says specifically has a detrimental impact on cultural, civic, and economic life of Canada. And I believe that the culture is directly within the 4 squares of the heritage. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Excuse me, so I'm going to suspend. Now, we have suspended so that I discussed with the clerk and the analysts, and I'm going to rule this motion admissible because it clearly speaks to the mandate of heritage.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think just as reference for the committee, I would just highlight exactly what you've referred to here, Chair, and that is that under the Canadian Heritage Mandate posted on the government's website, it says the Department of Canadian Heritage and its portfolio organizations play a vital role in the cultural, civic, and economic life of Canadians. So that line, which then appears in our motion, is used by the government itself to describe the mandate of heritage. And so it is appropriate that we would discuss then to what effect the carbon tax is having on those things in Canadian life.
And as my great staffer Emma said, as we were discussing this, if in fact you are struggling just to have enough to eat, and there are 2 million Canadians using food banks right now, the ability to afford arts and entertainment and is very, very difficult. And that really did digress just shortly here, and I'll wrap up soon. But I mean, you need food to live. It's the how of living, but you need arts and entertainment to give you that why. And so when people are deprived of that because of the affordability crisis, even those that are able to make it through, a lot of the why is taken away when you don't get to see the beauty of art and of live theater and amazing performances that are from coast to coast to coast. And so everything that we can do to get this economy back on track, not just to get people no longer reliant on the food bank, but so that they can afford to see the wonderful performances and afford that the reason why we go through every day, I think would be absolutely amazing. So I will be fully supporting this, and I would encourage all my colleagues, and I'm hoping we can get unanimous consent, unanimous support for it.
Clear people are struggling here at home and across the country. I think we're also seeing some serious theatrics from the Conservatives in trying to jam these motions in every single committee. I also, as somebody who's been a member of Parliament for a while and was here during the dark days of Stephen Harper when it came to the arts community, I think it's pretty rich to hear Conservatives go to the wall for the arts.
I want to point out right now the Winnipeg Jets, every day that they play, they're near the top of the NHL. Their owners have actually talked about an issue in Winnipeg because they're not selling out, and yet the hockey club today would have a pretty good chance of going a long way in the NHL playoffs. This is what's happening in this country. When you look at teams like Winnipeg, when you look at teams like Ottawa, although Ottawa's had a tougher year, but I think the cost of living has hit Canadians coast to coast. When I look at the Winnipeg Jets situation, they've already lost a hockey club years ago at Arizona. Now the owner came forward here about 2 months ago, not saying they're going to move, but saying he's concerned with the 12,000 instead of 15 to 16,000 that they should be getting. And then everyone in the Winnipeg area kind of got their back up, if you don't mind me saying it, Madam Chair, because they love the Jets, but they just can't afford the ticket. Canada, the rink.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Noor Mohammed.
You had noted earlier that when I had made comments, they were not relevant to the motion. I'm just curious how this has to do with the arts and culture funding and the carbon tax in Canada. And I'm not sure that talking about hockey and the NHL and privately funded hockey teams that, you know, like the Ottawa Senators, who have other reasons that people aren't going to their games.
I allowed Mr. Ward to do this because, of course, sports is part of heritage. But I think I take your point about the private sector making a lot of money in NHL, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Mr. Ward was trying to press a point about.
I certainly support moving quickly to a vote, but I also just want to be clear here. First of all, as the only Manitoban in this committee that has followed this story out of the Jets, I think it's really important that we be clear that the Jets nowhere in their announcement talked about the carbon tax. Right. So, I mean, just to bring that into this committee is just bizarre. I mean, if we want to talk about hockey, let's talk about hockey. But let's be truthful. When the Winnipeg Jets talked about a drop in sales, they didn't talk about the carbon tax.
Okay. Now, all right. So I think seeing no other discussion, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the vote, please.
So the vote is on the motion of Ms. Thomas. Mr. Noor Mohammed.
No.
Ms. Dillon.
No.
Madam Guiney.
No.
Ms. Latanzio.
No.
Mr. Fillmore.
No.
Mr. Waugh.
Yes.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Monsieur Gourde.
Oui.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes. Go.
Monsieur Champoux.
No.
Ms. Ashton.
No.
Yeas pour 4-4, nays contre 7-7.
The motion is defeated.